Morning folks, my name's Jamie Fisher, I'm the Sales Director here at Monument Tools. This would be where we start our general tours of the factory here. It gives a history of the business going right back to our formation in 1880. We're a fifth generation family run business. The Colliers have run this business, like I say, since back in 1880. So the image there of George Collier, which is our original retail premises, but Alfred Collier was the original Collier to establish the Monument business. So we were a merchant selling tools back in the City of London. Back through the middle, obviously during the war effort, all manufacturing of tools and things stopped, and all the manufacturing within the UK was put towards the war effort. So we made things like wing compasses, jeweller's screwdrivers, all sorts of intricate measuring instruments, right down to sights for the Lee Enfield rifles. So we made all sorts of things for the war effort. In the middle there, you'll see the 1963 catalogue, which has a rendition of the monument itself. So we're named after the monument to the Great Fire of London, which is in the old square mile, the old city of London. Move on to the next bit there, 1973. We were the first manufacturing business in the UK to have a computer. Up until that point, computers were really the mainstay of the financial sector. So you would have found them in the city, in banks and things like that. It would have been about 8 foot long, 4 foot wide, 4 foot high, and it was 0.8 megabytes in capacity, which is just crazy when you think you're walking around with a phone in your pocket these days with a terabyte of memory. Right through to the present day, and we'll go down into the factory and see some of the design and engineering capability that we've got. So we're very proud of the fact that we are a British manufacturer. 75% of the products that we sell globally are manufactured here in the UK, and the vast majority of those are manufactured here in this building. So we've moved downstairs into reception. I'd like to introduce John Collier. John is the fourth generation of Collier to run the business and our chairman. He's going to go through some of the products that we've got here in a very small selection from the history of the business.
Hello. One of the things that we like to do is to make sure that we've got examples of the stuff that we used to make, and this little cabinet here shows on the left hand side here stuff that we used to make, and then on the right hand side is more modern stuff, and most of which we do now. In particular, I'd like you to look at a pair of dividers which were made by my grandfather in about 1917 during the First World War. He tendered for them and got 1 5 halfpenny a pair, but he hadn't got any machinery or plant to make them, so he had to scurry around and find machines and rent arches in Brixton, southwest London, and apparently managed to turn them out okay. He also bought the patent to this saw here, which is called a sheet axe saw for cutting sheet material, and then he even invented a hole saw just in front of the sheet axe saw, and then he designed a sill plane for cutting the grooves in a windowsill underneath the windowsill to stop the rain, stop the rain going into the building so it dripped down onto the ground. On the right hand side here we've got some of the products that we've introduced fairly recently, including tube benders and these plastic pipe cutters, just to give a nice little overall view of what we do.
So we're working our way out towards the production part of the business now, but just wanted to stop here in this corridor where we've got some of the awards and nominations that we've achieved over the years. First one was for the OMAT. So the OMAT is a product that we manufacture in the UK under license. It was invented by a kitchen fitter. The background story to that is he was basically fed up of installing all these amazing kitchen cabinets and then plumbers coming in for second fix and soldering pipe work and scorching the insides of the cabinets. So he developed this really clever soldering mat with a split in it. Have a look on our YouTube channel if you want to see some more information about that product specifically. But it was nominated for the New Product Awards back in 2006. Back when Interbuild was sort of a huge industry show. Post-COVID, these things don't really happen now. Most of the exhibitions are done online. But yeah, we're proud of every nomination that we've got. We don't also just manufacture for ourselves. So if we go on to the next one here, this is a product that we manufactured on behalf of a business called Sentinel. So it is a dosing system for getting chemicals into heating systems. So basically you'd got the chemical within a pressurized container. You could either feed it in through the system pump, or you could feed it in through a radiator valve, and we basically made all the metal attachments to this in order to get that chemical into the heating system. Going back through some of the history of the business and some of the products that we've had for a longer period of time, this is a tube cutter. Every plumber will be aware of that sort of product, and this will have been some of the advertising that we'd have had in exhibitions back in the 80s. So yeah, just an interesting one with that. Not a lot's changed on the design of that product because it's absolutely fit for purpose. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we sell significant quantities of these, a lot of it based around the Made in Britain brand and the quality of that product. Another product that we manufactured under license originally from the designer of that product. So this was a New Products Award nomination back in 2005 for the olive puller. That product is now out of patent and copied by all sorts of other brands in the marketplace. But again, with us being a business that manufactures and can develop, with the feedback that we got from some of the focus groups that we now have a power tool driven version of that just to make it simpler. Power tools have come down dramatically in cost even since 2005 when that nomination was first put forward, and it just makes it a significantly easier product to use. But we'd never have thought of that development if we hadn't have sort of started with the end user first and worked with the Monument Masters, the focus groups that we've got to help us develop that product. Up to the image here, which is a front image of an export catalogue that we created nearly 40 years ago. A lot of these products are still in the range today. They'll be familiar with people. We've got tap reseaters, adjustable pipe cutters, manometers, small size tube cutters. We go right back to the sheet-tack, which the chairman was describing as one of the first products we ever manufactured, which was a hacksaw for cutting sheet material, particularly corrugated material, which is quite difficult to cut with a standard saw. And then right back to things like the articulated basin wrench, which we're famous for, that have been in the range since the 80s. Interesting one is a little product that's snuck in behind here, behind the manometer. So that is a swaging tool. So basically what that does is by placing that tool inside the end of a copper tube and striking it with a hammer, it expands the tube to the size that allows another piece of tube to fit inside it. So it saves a fitting. Well, people think it saves a fitting these days. These predate fittings. So that would have been how you would have joined two pieces of pipe together. Now, interesting one, going from 1980 right up to the present day, the market seemed to have come to the conclusion that those products were illegal. Don't know why, don't know who perpetrated that rumour, but sales of that product just dropped off the face of a cliff sometime between 1980 and say 2010. With the advent of the internet and with things like Instagram, most of you will be familiar with Pete Booth, PB Plumber. Well, Pete Booth did a video one weekend showing that product and how to use it. Got lots of feedback that you can't use it, and somebody far cleverer than I in relation to water regs checked and you could still use that product. And we came into the business on the Monday morning after that post went out over the weekend with orders for that product that we hadn't received for sort of 5 or 10 years. And it now forms part of our core range. Because when a plumber is on job, and all this is about making a plumber's life easier, if they don't have that one 15mm coupler that they need, or they're going from 15mm to old 1/2 inch, or from 22mm to old 3/4, if they've got one of those in the tool bag or in the van, they can expand one piece of pipe and solder another piece of pipe inside it and save themselves that fitting, or more importantly, the expensive part, which is a trip down to the local merchant to buy just what would be potentially one fitting to finish a job. So everything we try to manufacture either saves the engineer time or solves a genuine problem. It's not just it's not just designed for the sake of it.
This picture here shows the adjustable basin wrench, which forms part of the history of the basin wrench. And this particular part of the illustration shows the swivelability, if you like, of the head and the handle. So you can get it in really awkward places. This particular picture was made for the Cologne Hardware Fair in the 1980s. This one here is one of my patents. I patented the cutter and made it easier to machine, and it's now become a standard product within our range. We sell them all over the place.
So this is currently our main packaging rung machine we call the Illig, because that's who make it. It's ever such a simple process. So products are put on top of card, and then a plastic sheet comes over the top as it's moving now. The cutting wheels separate the card, and the cutters then chop that off. This gives us great flexibility. So again, because we either manufacture the product here or it's factored and we repackage it here, we buy it in bulk, it gives us great flexibility in what we are holding for our customers. So if we get a huge order in for this product particularly, which is a product we don't make, we factor this product, we can get an order today, we can pack it today and we can ship it tomorrow. But we don't have to carry it in stock in the warehouse taking up space, because we keep the raw material to the side of it, because we've got so many customers that it could be going in any one of sort of 3 or 4 brands. We don't do branded work for anybody else, we do dual brand. So we'll do, for example, for the PHG buying group, we do Instinct by Monument, and for the UK Plumbing Supplies buying group, we do Entity by Monument. But we're too proud of the brand to not have the brand on it, so you won't find us making products and putting somebody else's name on it. So we're now just the other side of the packing machine, and we're working our way into the factory where product is manufactured and assembled. But as a manufacturer, what it does is it gives us the flexibility to make product in advance of demand. So we've literally got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these trays full of our 15mm pipe cutters, our 28mm pipe cutters, our 22s. This item here is a bleed valve release unit that is part of our Grip Plus kits and goes into a kit that we do for one of the national distributors of our products. But by keeping it all loose like this, again, it gives us huge amounts of flexibility to react to demand, because we're not taking up loads of space in the warehouse with finished product. So again, we just come to another one of the racks that sat behind the packaging department behind me. What Monument is really famous for is making things out of metal. So we have a product here which is our new olive cutter. So this is a 100% made in Britain product. That's a 20mm cutter, and they're all ready here to be packaged to go out to customers. We've got something as simple as a basin waste holder. So if you've got a basin waste and you're wanting to hold it in place while you fit a nut underneath it, these 2 springs literally fit through the holes in the waste, bar through the top, and that holds it so that you can screw the nut from underneath. We've got something like the R15. So this is a cup that sits with an auto cut inside it, and again, look on the YouTube channel, you'll see this in action, but it allows you to turn an auto cut in a very small space. We've got chassis punches. So these are designed for punching holes in metal tanks and plastic tanks. So if you've got a water tank up in the loft, you'd use something like this to punch the hole in it to put the fitting through. We've got the 300M. Again, it's injection molded and metal. We've got an injection molders the other side of the factory you'll see in a little while, and all the other internals are manufactured here. This is a really clever product. It's a semi-automatic pipe cutter. So what that means is you wind it down to the size that you need, so say 15mm, and then it operates like an auto cut, like the old C-shaped cutter, in that it's spring loaded, so you don't need to keep winding the handle like you would do on a traditional cutter. As if by magic, these are the swaging tools that we were describing from the poster back through there that was from sort of the 1980s. The one that we have to say thank you to Pete Booth for sort of bringing back into the psyche of the plumber. They've always been used by colleges. You know, it's always something that's been trained right back through almost to the 50s and maybe even beyond. But this is a sliding unit here. So you would put the piece of pipe down and it would stop on that shoulder, and then you'd hit it with a hammer and that would force the pipe over the larger sleeve. And then what this being able to move does is it allows you to drag it out of the pipe. It forms like an internal hammer. So that allows you to pull it out of the pipe, otherwise it'd get stuck. And then we go right back to, again, taking back to the history that the chairman was talking about in the corridor. That is now the head of our basin wrench. Again, 100% manufactured here in the UK. casting snaps off the top of the jaw. We do 3 different sizes of jaw. But what we also do are lots of different connectors, which is in a range that we call Grip Plus. So that one, for example, which is 3 castellated heads, will work on a lock shield valve. So those are the red valves that you see on a brass fitting for shutting off water. Now, if they've been left for a long time, that red handle often seizes. So by placing that on there and using that, you've now got an 11-inch steel bar to give you the pressure to break that seal, and because it's forced onto all 3 faces of that red handle, you're not going to shear the handle off. Or you're less likely to, because the pressure is evenly dispersed across 3 faces within it. If you were to get your grips, as a lot of people would do, open them out to full capacity and then clamp them on the outside of that handle, the worst case scenario is that handle then collapses around the fitting and you can't even undo it. So probably one of the best kept secrets we've got are those sorts of products. And the difficult thing is getting that information out to you, the end user, and then giving you a place to purchase it where it's in stock. Because we've got hundreds of these little different adapters that have been designed along with end users to make jobs easier. But the really difficult thing is having them in a position where you can buy them. So be interested to get your feedback in the comments below about how we better communicate with you. Is this the right way to do it, or are there any other channels that we could be using? And then, as if by magic again, we come back to the olive puller, which I spoke about earlier. So that was 2005, I think, was the awards poster that we showed you back in the corridor. And that product would have been identical to this, with the exception of this 6.5mm hex on the top of it, which most of you will recognise once I remove this slip. Thanks to this tiny little notch in it, is just a 6.5mm hex bit. So that's the standard bit size that will go into, sorry, 1/2 inch, that will go into every power tool accessory kit that you've got in the van or in the drawer at home or in your DIY kit. Anything that you've got that's got multiple bits in it, that is a standard size. So what that allows to happen is you just pop your drill on the end and that will spin that at high speed. Again, this isn't a product video, more details on the YouTube channel, but allows you to drag the nuts off of a fitting, pull the olive with it without damaging the pipe. So these are some of the Citizen automatic machines that we've got. This one is currently making spindles for the 264Y. So over the years, the Colliers have invested in this sort of machinery to bring us closer and closer to the manufacturing base of all the products. If you went back 20, 30 years, we'd have had a third-party component business manufacturing the components, and we would be assembling them within one of our factories, either this one or the one that we had previously in Balham. And we endeavour now to get the vast majority of the manufacturing physically within this building and within the Monument business. We do still subcontract to other manufacturers around the UK. There's a lot of things that we can't do, large-scale injection moulding, die casting, those sorts of things, but we do partner British die casters, British injection moulders, to make sure that the product that we proudly stamp made in Britain is made in Britain. It's not assembled in Britain from global components. If you take our auto cut, for example, the C-shaped cutter, the only item on that whole thing that's not made in the UK is the screw that fits in the end of it, and that's only because we can't find a manufacturer of screws in the UK. They just don't exist anymore. So this is a really clever piece of machinery. I know they'll zoom in and show the things whizzing around, but basically what it's doing is taking steel bar from this cassette up here, and through a various sections of machining is milling, is trimming, is cutting threads. In some instances it's even intricate enough to engrave. So a lot of our parts will have our website name on them, and this machine will engrave it as part of the process. So as you follow me down the machine, steel stock is here, it's fed into the machine, it's processed, and then it comes out on this conveyor belt, and one of the items will slide off the end here to give us what is a finished component. So that is the slide unit, which will have the nut on the end of it, which you will turn to move the head and the wheel on a small scale adjustable pipe cutter. The items come down the conveyor belt and into the bin ready to go. Then we've got quality control. So the first thing we need to do, use the compressed air line, blow any oil off that's inside the thread, because the bit that we're looking for is the distance between the base of each thread. If there was oil still in there, potentially we get a false reading. So we then move down to what's called a shadow scope. This item then fits inside here, and using the light projection through that lens, it magnifies the image of the product up here in the screen. So what you're looking for is the crosshairs here. So I'm lining up that item with the bottom of that line. I then zero the scope at the top and then wind it down in line with the top of the next thread, and that then gives us a reading which gives us the depth of that thread. And that is what we're checking, and that is the tolerance that's required for that part. So this is another one of the Citizen machines we've got that's currently making pipe cutter wheels. So if we move down the machine again, you've got the steel bar again being fed into the machine, but instead of that quite intricate long bar that we've just seen, we're now making something what may look as simple as a cutter wheel. But the bit that differentiates Monument from all the other manufacturers of cutter wheels out there and manufacturers of pipe cutters, irrespective of the brand, is that because we make the wheels and we understand the metrology of the material we're cutting, because things like copper is of different densities in different countries, we have somewhere in the region of 20 different cutting wheels for the cutters that we manufacture. Somewhere, and I'm sure the chairman will find us the photograph, is a photograph of a guy called Seve Ballesteros. He was a professional golfer back in the late 80s, early 90s, from Spain, as the name probably suggests, was Severiano Ballesteros. He had a pro shop, so he would adjust golf clubs to the length for his students, and there's our pipe cutters in the background with the wheels specifically for cutting stainless steel, which in those days is what golf club shafts were made of. So we make pipe cutters, not just copper pipe cutters. We do stainless steel, we do galv, we do copper of all sorts of various hardnesses, and our sort of expertise and secret sauce is making sure that that wheel, be it its cutting angle, its density, its hardness, whatever it may be, is the absolute perfect wheel for cutting that size of that material. We don't take one wheel off the shelf and try and make it cut even British copper pipe from 6mm to 28mm and beyond in commercial with one cutting wheel. I think one of our cutting wheels does a maximum of 3 or 4 sizes, because as the copper gets bigger, it gets thicker, and you need a different design of wheel, whether it's a steeper angle or it's harder, as I said before. But that's our secret sauce. We know how that works. We understand the metrology of it. Our engineers understand what to do. So when somebody comes to us and says, oh, you can't use that type of cutter in this country, our first question is, why can't we? We then go to the end users and understand what they're doing currently, which is why we have Monument Masters groups in America, Australia, New Zealand, everywhere we sell the product. It's understanding from the end user what their problems are and get the right answer. Then we can make prototypes, then we can work on it. And sometimes we can't. Sometimes the copper's too hard, sometimes the steel's too thick. Sometimes the way they're already doing it is better, or at least as good as the way that we can provide a solution to. And at that point we step back and go, we're not arrogant enough to think that we automatically get everybody's business. You, Mr. Plumbing and Heating Engineer in New Zealand, keep buying the brand you're buying. But by the way, have you thought about this product that we also do that obviously doesn't exist in your marketplace? So that's how we operate. So again, coming through the QA process, we always check the next product that comes down and off the machine. So that is the next wheel that comes out. We don't need to blow this one off because we're not using the shadow scope, so there's not going to be a build-up of oil, so we just give it a clean down. We'll then pop it into the micrometer, which, to be fair, to be first wheel check is down to 0. So we check that one and it's reset itself to 0. We'll then wind that out and wind it in, and we check the tolerance on that. And that is the diameter of it, but that's the number that we're heading for. You can understand why we've fogged that number out, because that's our design of that wheel. The next thing to check is the diameter of the wheel. So again, we'll come back to the micrometer, and with the blade in the center of the 2 micrometer faces, again we'll do the fine adjustment up to the surface, We'll check that number. You need to take my word for it, it's exactly the same. When we ran through this trial a couple of seconds ago, because this isn't my day job, I've just been shown how to do this by one of our engineers, is we come back over to the panel here, and what this allowed our engineer to do was readjust the cutting surface, because whilst the one that we tested previously was within tolerance, we're always trying to get it as close as we possibly can. So we actually adjusted it 0.001 of a millimetre on the final diameter of the wheel. This came off 3 times later, which is when the change took place, and this is now exactly where we wanted it to be. The one that went out before is perfectly acceptable. It was well within tolerance. But when we check them, we always make those little adjustments to try and get as close to perfection as we possibly can. So without literally taking you through every machine and what's working today, we've got a slightly larger version of the machine here. That is making spindles for the olive pullers. So the product that you saw me over there by the packing bench earlier working on, that's the spindle that sits inside there, including the hex at the end of it where we insert the power tool drive. Now, most people are probably assuming the other side of this camera that we go out and we buy those bits off the shelf because everybody does them. When you can make them, what's the point? So that there is a 1/2 inch by 6.5 millimeter hex bit, as good as any one that you'd buy from any of the other brands that make power tool accessory bits. You all know who they are. For that to fit in the end there to then become the power tool drive. So we make the bit that makes the bit. And as you see later, we make the tool that makes the bit, which is great for being a metal basher and a manufacturer. So we're just moving over to one of the assembly cells within the factory. Every auto cut, which is our name for a copper pipe cutter, an automatic copper pipe cutter, every single one of them that we produce here in the UK is hand assembled in the UK. All of our export products are the same. It's been interesting since COVID. You'll all have seen the news that container prices went through the roof. Shipping was all messed up, things were all over the world. It's really changed the focus from a lot of our customers for what they refer to as onshoring products. So that means bringing the supply chain significantly closer to the point at which you sell it, so that you don't suffer the delays that people suffered in the recovery process after COVID, when they'd got the 12-week shipping delays and the 16-week manufacturing delays that are sometimes incurred by sourcing products from the Far East. One product that we did source from the Far East was our small-sized automatic copper pipe cutters. So our 6mm and our 8mm were all manufactured by a very good company in Taiwan, who we had a relationship with for many, many years. And we couldn't manufacture a product that could compete with them on price based on the fact that it's not an everyday product. In the UK, it's not a volume product. In a heating format, it's only for LPG gas, caravans, the paraffin, the oil boilers out in the countryside where there's no mains gas, as well as microbore pipe that was very popular in the 90s in new build. So it's only ever really used for small amounts of work, very specific, or for ripping out old systems when you're putting a new one in. So, and there was a deluge of cheap Far Eastern sourced products in that part of the market. As we developed in all the machinery that you've seen already, and we become more cost efficient due to scale, we crossed that threshold where it meant that manufacturing that product in-house now became financially viable. So we now produce all of our own 6mm, 8mm and 10mm auto cuts. So this is a 10mm, an 1810R. Again, 100% manufactured here in the UK, with the exception of that little screw, which I've already said is a bit of a pain because we can't get them in the UK. But the rollers, the wheels, the springs, the castings, they're all manufactured in the UK and then assembled here by hand in our factory before it goes out to the reseller of the product and finally gets into your hands potentially if you're an end user, and you get to use it cutting, in this case, 10mm copper pipe. So now what we've stepped onto is the 22mm version. So as you can see, there's a bit of a family running on here. We've got the Made in Britain proudly on the castings. That's the body that we would use for 6, 8 and 10mm. And then we've moved up to 22mm here. But that would also be the same body that we did the 21mm version for Ireland and New Zealand. So the difference between a 22mm cutter, which is what this is, and a 21mm cutter, and people would think 1mm in that, does it make a difference? Absolutely it makes a difference, because When we had our first focus group here, we accidentally mixed some up. So some of the end users who went home with our twin pack, which we thought was a 15 and 22 mil kit, we'd made a slight error when we were putting them together in a bit of a rush before the meeting. We'd put the wrong size in, we put the 21 mil in. So they went out, and the feedback we got, as you can imagine, it wasn't brilliant. It worked, but the tension in the spring meant it jumped off the pipe. Can't tell you exactly how we did it, because again, it's a bit of our secret sauce, but we've got identifiers on these products that other people wouldn't understand, to understand the difference between a 21mm version of that and a 22mm version. We asked the consumer to take a photograph of it. We could identify we'd sent the wrong one. We made an apology, we sent the right one out. Very rarely does it happen, but having a proper quality process in place, that means if there is an issue, you can identify potential causes of that issue. Again, just helps us build the reputation and the brand that we've had since the 1880s. So again, as I've said previously, none of these are product videos. If you want to learn how to use the products or the background to something specific, please go to the YouTube channel where we've got a lot more detail around it. But just to give you sort of the potted history of the product that we've got here, this single-sized this single-sized pipe bender that we are exceptionally proud of, was a product that existed somewhere else in the world, but we developed it specifically for the UK market, because that part of the world, we couldn't just buy that bender and bring it to the UK, because we've already said with the pipe cutters, the difference between a 21mm version and a 22mm version is the difference between it working and it not working. So we completely redeveloped that product and brought it in-house. Again, 100% of it is now manufactured in the UK. Die casting's done with a partner, all the metal machinery done in here. We even make the pins in-house that hold the heads to the handles. We also developed the extension handles that some of you may be familiar with. Now, one interesting thing about the extension handles is that they carry the same thread as the fittings on a radiator. So again, we go back to our focus groups. They've all had these to test. They're all really happy with them. They love the fact the 15mm one fits in a tool bag. They don't have to carry 15 and 22 around if they're only going to be doing 15 all day and they're heavy. Absolutely loving it. And then one guy goes, yeah, but did you realise what your handles are really useful for? And obviously we've got no idea, because we don't fit radiators all day, we just make the tools. They actually have the same thread in the handle as they have in the top of the radiator fittings. So they screw into the top of a radiator. So if you can imagine a 2 metre long radiator sat off the back of his, and you've got to carry that out of a property, they literally now just screw, as if I planned it, these handles into the radiator, and then they can, one each end, lift them up, and they've got an easy way of holding it, rather than trying to get their arm round, etc, etc. And one guy even sent us a photograph of a slightly smaller radiator. It was about a 1.2 metre, but still a double skin, quite heavy. He'd plugged the bottom of the radiator so it's full of water, screwed these into the top, and then he'd got like a long luggage strap between the two handles, popped it under his shoulder and walked out of the property carrying the radiator in what is a far safer way than, I'm not even going to do the impression of it, but trying to carry a twin skin radiator out of a property. So just to wrap up the factory tour, this is the tool shop. So this is the place where we make the tools that make the tools that make the tools. And as my 7-year-old daughter pointed out to me when I did a video tour a couple of weeks ago, when this place was quiet and I walked them around on FaceTime, we actually make the tools that make the tools that make the tools that make the tools. So the expertise that we have within the business to go from a CAD suite through the back, generating a program that will be then fed directly into these machines to make either prototypes or finished items, is exceptional, and as we believe doesn't exist anywhere else within our product category. It does make us Europe's largest manufacturer of plumbing hand tools. Manufacturer. We're not a factoring business that brands, we make and develop the products that we sell. But we don't just make and develop the products that you know us for. So whilst I can't necessarily mention the brands that we have done work for over the years, but we have made the nose cone of Concord. We have made scarf racks. We've made 50-year anniversary presents for the longest serving employee for Tesco's. We've been involved in all sorts of products. We made parts of the wedding invitation for a Sikh wedding up at the huge Godvara in Leamington Spa, and our plumb bobs were turned into the finials on the top of the temple, and the wedding invitation was a scale model of the temple, and we made the tiny little finials that sat on top of that wedding invitation. We get that business by reputation, the same reputation that we are really proud of with Monument. But we get that through the design houses in Clerkenwell in London. The people who have the amazing ideas to create those scarf hooks, those vodka distilling gift packs for Harrods at Christmas, all of the weird and wonderful things that we've got involved in. But it also allows us to make lovely little things like this, which is a scale model of the Monument from which we take our name. And if we didn't have machines like these, the cost of having that manufactured out of a solid piece of brass, and this weighs about half a kilo, £2 in old money, would be somewhere in the region of £500, just because of the sheer machine time that takes to make that sort of thing. A cutting wheel, here's one I prepared earlier, and as you'll see from the other images, that is significantly different to the ones that you've seen previously. So as I said, we make the wheel specific to the item that we're cutting. That takes 25 seconds to make on that first machine. This takes 25 minutes to machine. So you can imagine the cost involved in making that as a proportion of the overall cost of the item, and the fact that that weighs half a kilo. The piece of brass that it comes out of originally probably weighed 3.5, 4, maybe even 5 kilos. So it's an exceptionally expensive thing to give somebody else to do as a subcontractor. That was a project we gave one of our design engineers, and we now use them as gifts and thank yous, particularly to some of our export customers and key customers when they come on a factory tour. And we do some little scale models of them as well, which I'll just grab off camera. We do the little Diddy one as well. It's little Diddy cousin, which obviously takes slightly less time to manufacture. So thank you for joining us on this tour around the factory. I am exceptionally proud to work for Monument, to be working for a 5th generation business who still strives to be the absolute leader in its market. We all carry on our sleeves hashtag Ask for Monument, and I'll ask our videographer at this point to put in the little skit of our chairman doing his little hashtag. Sorry, not our chairman, our managing director, the chairman's son. We also like to have a bit of a laugh while we work here at Monument, but we all proudly carry that because it is our job, everybody in this business, to ensure that when you, as a potential consumer of our product, or a potential purchaser and reseller of our product, come to think about plumbing tools, you will always hashtag Ask for Monument. So, this factory, this facility, is probably one of the best kept secrets in our industry. We do our very best to ensure that everybody who needs to know, from the plumbing and heating engineer who will be using our copper pipe cutter tomorrow to fit a new radiator in your house, to you, the avid DIYer who may be fitting an outside tap, make sure you put a non-return valve on it for meeting water eggs. One for Paul Daly, one of our Monument masters in there. Or a procurement manager for one of the businesses that we would love to stock our products. Everything starts with the end user. It starts with the physical consumer of our product. And I've got a little call to action at the end of this video. Down in the comments below will be a link to a type form. And at this stage, I'm calling for plumbing and heating engineers and plumbers, those people who are using our product all the time in their primary role, to register your interest, should you be interested in partaking in a factory tour. Coming and seeing what we do, coming and seeing some of the products in more detail. And maybe, off the back of that, becoming one of our Monument masters. That service is managed for us by a company called Expert Trades. They run a platform called Tool Talk, which is a professional trade review platform. We'll also put a link to Tool Talk in the comments, because if you already have our products and you like them, or you don't like them and you've got a way that you think we could improve them, please use that platform to use your reviews, because it is trade audited. We know that the people who leave those reviews are trades individuals, and we really value those trade reviews, because really it's our bread and butter, you the trade user of our product. So if you are interested, take 2 minutes, fill in your information. You're not going to get spammed with a newsletter and promotions every week. We just want to engage in more of you, so that the next time you're in your plumber's merchant and somebody says, oh, I like such and such a product, and you say, hopefully, have you thought about buying the Monument one? It's made in Britain. And they question that, you can say, because you've been around this factory the same as the video's been following me, that yes, they do make it in Britain, because I've seen it. And here's the little video on my phone showing me doing it. Thank you.